Netflix suspends 3 employees, including a trans person who spoke out against Dave Chappelle, that new special he came out with, for crashing a leadership meeting. Hello, guys. Matthew here with Controversial Politics. The truth shouldn't be controversial, but let's get into it. Netflix has suspended 3 employees for crashing a meeting of its top executives, including an out trans person who criticized a new comedy special from Dave Chappelle. Tara Field, a senior software engineer based in San Francisco, was among those suspended late last week for attending the QBR, Netflix Quarterly Business Review, a 2-day affair that convened the top 500 employees at the company. So this software engineer was not one of the top 500 employees of the company, or they would have been invited. Field, who identifies as queer and trans, and the other employees were not invited to the virtual gathering, according to insiders. Oh no, poor babies. Netflix did not suspend Field over recent tweets decrying what she called anti-trans jokes in the Chappelle special. Individuals familiar with Netflix said, but for attending uninvited. Yeah, well, you're going to show up into a business meeting uninvited. I would imagine you get fired. I'm surprised, but I guess they really need her. An investigation has been launched into the 3 employees. Field did not immediately respond to requests for comment. It's absolutely untrue to say that we have suspended any employees for tweeting about this show. Our employees are encouraged to disagree openly, and we support their right to do so. That's good. But it looks like they suspended them for something else, walking into that meeting. Last Wednesday, Field wrote a lengthy Twitter thread, which we're going to read, about The Closer, the new Chappelle stand-up special in which the comic accuses the trans community of having thin skin. They do. So does the far left. That's a fact. In her tweets, Field writes, "Yesterday, we launched another Chappelle special where he attacks the trans community." I'm not sure that stating the fact that trans women are not women is an attack. I think it's become an attack through perception. Because the reality is, a trans woman is not a woman. There's even with the Klinefelter genes, or even with, if you look into, there's something called Klinefelter syndrome. You can break it down to gender dysphoria, intersex people, and male and female categories. They're very compartmentalized. They're not as blurry as the far left would have you believe. So what somebody would consider an attack might just be somebody stating the truth. Like if I want to say I'm a dinosaur, and you tell me I'm not a dinosaur, that's not an attack. Even if I perceive it as an attack. And that is indeed me having thin skin. So if Dave Chappelle is in his special, and I saw his special, so I'm very aware what he says, he's basically saying that these people mutilating their genitals, they're creepy. They're weird. They're like, they need help. And they're not women. They're not men. They're not what they say they are. You are what you're born as. Intersex people being the small exception, but that's something for a completely different video. You are what you're born as. Sex and gender are interlinked, and they always have been for all of humanity. So it's not an attack, Field. Sorry about that, but that's not an attack on the trans community. That's somebody stating facts. Biological facts are not an attack. And the very validity of transness. Transness is not valid. Transness is not valid. Science proves that. Biological sex and gender are linked. How you feel is not reality. If how you felt was reality, we'd live in a very strange world, wouldn't we? Oh, wait a second. We do, don't we? I had to really think about that. We already are in that reality where feelings are more valid than facts. AOC said it. Facts don't tell the whole story. It's like they tell a lot more of the story than people's feelings about themselves do. That's for sure. All while trying to pit us against other marginalized groups. Yeah, because it's an important sociological analysis to make. And it's also funny that people in the trans community have created this marginalization for themselves by doing something ridiculous and strange. And they want to complain about it rather than get counseling. You're going to hear a lot of talk about offense. We are not offended. Certainly sounds like you are. Our existence is funny to him. It's funny to most normal people. And when we object to his harm, we're offended. Yeah, that's the definition of being offended. That's the definition of taking offense to something. Right? We object to his harm. That's actually more than being offended. That's a step above. She then listed numerous names of trans people, specifically highlighting trans women of color killed in hate crimes. Well, trans women of color, specifically, a lot of times are involved in prostitution. I think I've talked about this in previous videos before, but you cannot look at trans women of color being killed and just chalk it up to hate crimes. We have a large usage of drugs in the trans community. We have a large usage of drugs in the gay community, the LGBT community. These people generally use drugs at a higher rate, about 6 times higher rate than the general population. As far as prostitution, trans women of color are prostitutes at a far higher rate than the general population, even other trans people. That's why they're killed, because prostitutes are killed at a far higher rate than the general population. Moving on. There's no hate crime there. I'm sure there are some, but to make it out like it's an epidemic and Dave Chappelle is stirring up the flames by telling the truth is just ridiculous. At the meeting, Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos fielded questions about how leadership should handle employees and talent upset over Chappelle's remarks. He addressed the entire group in a memo after the event, which Variety obtained on Monday. Chappelle is one of the most popular stand-up comedians today, and we have a long-standing deal with him. His last special, Sticks and Stones, also controversial, is our most watched, stickiest, and most award-winning stand-up special to date. That's what he said, which is good. As with our talent, we work hard to support their creative freedom, even though this means there will always be content on Netflix some people believe is harmful. I like how they phrase that some people believe is harmful. They're straight up saying it's not harmful, because it's not. You choose what's harmful to you. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent, and that's what people talk about when they say the far left gets offended too easily. Why don't they just turn off their computer? Why do they have to sit there and complain about it? It's the definition of offended, right? I understand that they want social change, but social changes occur through laws. But rather, the far left would rather have social change through complaining on Twitter and tearing statues down. Anyways, let's keep going here. Other Netflix talent speaking out against the Chappelle special includes Jacqueline Moore, the showrunner of its original series Dear White People. Nothing could be more racist than a show called Dear White People. Imagine if I had a show called Dear Black People. Here's how you need to change. Right? There's no reason why it's not racist on the other side. You don't get to choose skin colors and say, well, it's not racist if one person does it. But if another person's racist, that's fine because they're black. No. Dear White People is a racist show. It's a racist idea to sit there and preach to white people as though we're the saviors, as though we're the only solution to this. How awful of a white supremacist idea is that? Moore told Variety last week that she never loved Dave's trans material before, but this time it felt different. This time I felt like, oh, people are laughing at this joke, and they're agreeing that it's absurd to call me a woman. It is! It is absurd to call you a woman because you're not. And society slowly trying to push this on us, that these people are women, that's not going to change how people feel inside. It's the same thing when society tried to push that rap was music on society. There's still a large chunk of Americans that they might not say it out loud, but they know rap is not music, right? Because they're afraid of getting canceled and being called racist. I'm not afraid of that. I'll tell you right now, rap is talking over stolen, repeated, looped music. And for the few musicians that do contribute to it, you're contributing to somebody who's not going to musically explore the music theory, the notes of your music. There's no musical notes in the words. That is not music. That is spoken word poetry on top of music. It's a new thing. Let it be its own new thing. But in the same way that the world has slowly started accepting rap as music, people are starting to accept people who say they're a woman. They're accepting that. It's like, we're getting to a strange place. Let's go ahead and read her full Twitter thread, because this is actually the whole purpose of the video. I work at Netflix. Yesterday, we launched another Chappelle Show special where he attacks the trans community. Again, we talked about that. He didn't attack anybody. He just said the truth. Being trans is actually pretty funny. If you're someone who actually knows about the subject matter, how could volunteering for a second puberty not be funny? That isn't what he's doing, though. Oh, so he's only allowed to make fun of the things you say he's allowed to. So he's not allowed to make fun of you. Oh, I see. Okay. So then, oh, interesting. So then, where does it end? Right? Tara, if he's not allowed to make fun of you and your choices, then where does it end? Where does comedy start and begin? Because last time I checked, comedy always has a victim. Last time I checked. Look at anything funny. Is there always a victim? Typically, yeah. It could be somebody slipping on a banana peel. That's funny. That guy got hurt, right? It could be a joke at your friend's expense. Hey, you're getting fat. right? That's funny. Your friend's feelings got hurt. Comedy is at the expense of something. It always has been. And you don't get to choose what it is and what it isn't. It's funny to people for a very good reason. Being trans is that isn't what our existence is funny to him. Or your existence is funny to most Americans. Generally, people agree with that. Look at the polls. People don't think that trans people are what they purport themselves to be. Gender dysphoria is an extremely troubling disorder that needs to be addressed, not fostered as normal. Our existence is funny to him. The problem is that people are responding to something we never said. We aren't complaining about being offended. Nobody said that you're being offended. You're being offended. Your actions said that. So nobody's responding to something you never said. They're responding to something that you did that you're just not aware of. Your outrage, your wokeness, your offense over somebody telling a joke about the truth, that trans women are not women, that is what you're afraid of. That's what you're offended by. You're afraid of people speaking that because that's a truth. That's a truth. And even if you don't see that that's a truth, it doesn't change the fact that it's a truth. Even if you don't want to accept the fact that it's a truth, doesn't change the fact that it's the truth. Gender and sex have always been married, and they always will be. The chromosomes prove it. Even the Klinefelter syndrome doesn't take away from that, nor do intersex people, as typically intersex people lean one or the other. We don't have thin skin. Yeah, you do. Look at this Twitter thread. If that's not a definition of thin skin, I don't know what is. You try going to a pharmacy and having them call you sir in front of everyone while you pick up your estradiol. Well, I don't have mental issues that causes me to, be unavailable in the marketplace of women, and then change my. I don't have mental issues that makes me want to change my sex. And I'm going to say something controversial here. Have you guys ever noticed how transgender people are typically, a little unfortunate looking genetically speaking? They tend to be very. It's very rare you'll see like a very sexy, attractive trans person. They exist. But most of the trans people you see, especially on Twitter and social media and people complaining, they tend to have this very unfortunate look to them. And I can't help thinking, this red-pilled perspective that I'm about to give you, please don't get upset by it, but I can't help but think that these people failed in love, and so they just went the other way. What happens? I mean, we see it time and time again. There's plenty of studies to prove that. That's a very large factor, especially with the absent father, like men becoming gay, like when you have a no male role model, that typically happens. So these things scientifically have connections. There are reasons for people to be confused about their gender, but there's not a scientific one. It's all mental. It is. And we know that because the same things that connect genetics to how we feel are causation and correlation blended together. But you don't get to choose reality based on how you feel. What we object to is the harm that content like this does to the trans community. Again, that's being offended. And trans people of color. And very specifically black trans women. People who look like me aren't being killed. I'm a white woman. I got to worry about Starbucks writing Tara on my drink. Please, don't even start with the black-white thing. I'm not even going to address that. That's a whole other can of worms. Promoting TERF, which I believe is trans exclusionary radical feminism ideology, which is what we did by giving it a platform yesterday, directly harms trans people. Again, telling the truth. If telling the truth is harmful to trans people, you really got to you really probably should reevaluate what it is that you guys are doing. Because none of these people are saying these things out of hate. They're saying these things because they believe them to be true, and they are true. These people who say trans women aren't women, they're not saying it because they hate you. They're not saying because they don't want to acknowledge your feelings. They're saying it because a society where we don't know what sex or gender even means destroys a society. Look at what happened with the bathrooms and the restrooms. Look what happens with the Wee Spa salon incident. All these problems are because of these people being accepted. And I want to accept people, but I don't want to accept a mental illness as reality. That is destroying society, and that's a fact. You see it. I mean, I don't even want to talk about that anymore. It's not some neutral act. Yeah, no, comedy never is a neutral act. It changes people's minds, and I'm glad that people's minds are changing about trans people thanks to Dave Chappelle. This is not an argument with two sides. Yeah, you're right. It's a scientific fact that trans women are not women, so there is no argument. There's no sides. It is an argument with trans people who want to be alive and people who don't want us to be. No, I don't want you dead. I just want you to get some help, some psychological counseling, some help for your gender dysphoria. This all gets brushed off as offense, though, because we're just too sensitive. Yeah, you are. That's how you got led down the path you got led down. Then it's too easy to ignore us. It's not that we want to ignore you. It's that bad ideas get shoved down and good ideas get shoved up. Why your ideas are getting shoved up right now is because they're emotionally satisfying to the people that believe them. Not because they have validity. Not because they have scientific truth. But because it's emotionally satisfying to say that I'm trans and people believe me. That's emotionally a win. It's a victory. But it's not true. It doesn't mean anything. Then I'm surprised I haven't had anyone call me ironically hysterical yet today. I don't know what that means. So who does this harm? Why don't we go over the list of some people from the U.S. who aren't offended by Dave Chappelle's special? Let's talk about who this harms if Dave Chappelle is not allowed to speak. It harms every single man and woman and boy and girl who is confused and thinks that they're transgender. You're harming every single one of them because the transgender rate of suicide is massively high. We'll get into that. In fact, let's do it right now. Here it is. The Aggressive Research Intelligence Facility, which conducts reviews of healthcare treatments for the National Health Service, concluded that none of the studies, this was hundreds of studies, provides conclusive evidence that gender reassignment surgery is beneficial for patients. It found that most research was poorly designed, which skewed the results in favor of physically changing sex. There was no evaluation of whether other treatments, such as long-term counseling, which I advocate for, by the way, might help transsexuals, or whether their gender confusion might lessen over time. We actually found a lot of people who regretted their surgery after the fact. You don't hear about that in the news. There's hundreds of these studies on how damaging this is for people and how damaging it is for society. But we're going to continue. So let's keep going down this thread into this rabbit hole. So now she proceeds to go down the list of people who were killed. Trans people were killed. This is all anecdotal evidence and completely meaningless. Because when you look at the numbers, we can see that trans people are doing things that are putting themselves at risk. It's not... The percentage that's related to hate is more likely than less than 1%. Between 1 and 10%. And that's not a problem we need to be focusing on. We need to focus on the 90%. And what is that problem caused by? People thinking that they're men when they're women. People thinking the opposite of what reality is. That's much more of a problem than individual murders that cannot be verified as to what caused them. Yeah, she just keeps going on about more anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence is completely meaningless. I provided data. She's providing some anecdotes. Yeah, again, more of this. Is that all she does for the rest of the thread? Because that doesn't mean anything. Statistically speaking, this is irrelevant. We need to see data in a whole chart and a table to determine if this was hate. Right? Yeah, none of this is helpful. Yeah. So, in conclusion, it looks like Tara Field, this Netflix engineer, is insane, unhinged, and mentally unwell. And unfortunately for her or him, Netflix and the world is accepting her mental illness and telling her, yeah, you know what? Your version of reality, that you don't have a penis, you were supposed to be born with a vagina. That's true. Not only is that true, but we're going to treat it law-wise like it's true. This is just horrific, what's happening to society, and I'm really sad to see it. And I hope you guys are too, and I hope you guys can give me your thoughts on what else should be done with something like this. I think the fact that Netflix is defending freedom of speech is great, but I think a lot more could be done. Anyways, I love you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Let me know if you have any topics you want me to discuss, and thanks for watching.